Welcome back to Price Ball. We have Chad Kerksick here. Really excited. Chad, we just met in person finally at ISSN 2024.
Yep.
You have a lot going on. So in this episode, kind of want to recap and follow up to Jose Antonio, or Joey as we call him, episode 137 on the podcast. This will be episode 141, and then we'll probably tag on with another one after this in episode 142. But Chad, please introduce yourself and let's do a recap on what happened at ISSN this year. I think it's your first year running it, so you probably learned a whole lot. But we'd like to hear a lot about you because I think you'd be a valuable asset to our community if we can get you on video more often.
Sure. Yeah. So, Mike, thanks for the introduction, Ben. It was certainly, enjoyable to get to meet everybody because I've seen different episodes and obviously heard a lot more about you guys, I think, in the last few years. So my background, so I work as a university professor at a university in St. Louis or St. Charles, Missouri called Lindenwood University. We're NCAA Division I. We have about 7,000 students. We're in a suburb about 30 minutes kind of northwest of St. Louis. So I teach and do research at the university here within the exercise science program. So we've got undergraduate and graduate degrees. I direct a laboratory that we call the EPNL, which stands for the Exercise and Performance Nutrition Laboratory. Within that lab, we do predominantly clinical research trials examining exercise and nutritional interventions that impact health outcomes, performance outcomes, and recovery outcomes. The majority of our funding comes from kind of commercial sponsors, different companies that are interested in researching various products, proof of concept ideas for safety, efficacy claims, and things of that nature. And then I also serve the College of Science and Technology and Health as a assistant dean for research and innovation. So kind of help to lead and grow some of the research efforts here at the institution. I got my PhD in 2006 from Baylor University in exercise performance, exercise, nutrition, and preventive health. And, kind of during that time, I think even if you go backwards from there, I got my master's at the University of Memphis. And it was my master's degree where I really got involved with the research related aspects, although I kind of had a little bit of a knack for it. Kind of a funny little story. My very first research study that I organized on my own was a study involving our swim team at a undergraduate research institution in Kirksville, Missouri called Truman State, where I got my undergrad. Made all kinds of mistakes with the design and the dosing and totally screwed things up. It was FUBAR beyond belief. And that was kind of a first rendition of kind of the research aspect. Definitely had a lot of interest in exercise and nutrition very early on. Much of Rick Kreider's work at the time was focused in on creatine and athletes. He was doing things with EAS at the time. Kind of really doing a lot of their initial work. And that stuff really sparked my interest. I was able to meet Rick at a National Strength and Conditioning Conference. That really kind of led me to, start my master's degree there. I worked in his laboratory as a research assistant. He decided to move to Baylor and start a PhD program, became the chair. I moved with him from Memphis to Baylor. Started his laboratory up there. And then during a 4-year period of time, we conducted an insane amount of research on exercise and nutrition and health and supplementation. If you look back, we did some of the original research on the former NO2, like an arginine alpha ketoglutarate product. Did several studies, for Muscle Tech, had a huge funding program related with Curves for Women, which was kind of exercise and protein and nutrition related studies, metabolism, a lot of weight loss and women's health related questions, a lot of supplementation work. First job was at the University of Oklahoma. Amazing first start there. Worked, basically 2 doors down from Jeff Stout, who's now the chair at University of Central Florida and kind of a sport nutrition research icon. Joel Kramer was there, who's also at UCF now. Tremendous researcher within sports science. And then I went to University of New Mexico. Trisha Van Dusseldorp, who's the former president of ISSN, was one of my PhD students when I was at New Mexico. And then my wife and I, our babies were born out there. And it was time to come home. So I was born and raised in the St. Louis area. Came back to Lindenwood, been here since 15, and it's been an amazing ride.
Man, that's awesome. You pretty much have been everywhere and know everyone. Can I just ask you a question? How old are you? Because you seem really young, but you got your PhD in like 2006. So
Yeah.
you look young.
Mike, I'll let you think I'm young. My kids remind me that I'm not. I tell you, I'm 47.
Oh,
So
okay. Wow. Okay. Great.
I'm
Yeah.
47 years old. And man, there was a period of time where you're like the young fun professor, you know what I mean? And then I don't really know it's not that I'm not the old crabby professor yet. I mean, I'm crabby I guess I'm old to a lot of people, but I've still got a good 20 years, I think, with what we can do. So definitely still trying to keep the gas pedal down, trying to figure out ways how to make an impact on our students, also on the field. Really just try to continue to do as much as we can in areas, and wish we could do more in some areas than others. So
I almost want to tell you, like, or I want to ask, like, what is there to be crabby about? Because you have such a cool job. I every time I get to watch you speak or hear what you have to say, or if I see your name like cited on our blog, like, you're always doing cool stuff. You're sharing information on things that people want to know about. So I kind of a thank you, as in a way.
Ben, I appreciate that. I think, I mean, honestly, opportunities like this right here, right now, what I'm doing are some of the more valuable things that I think I can do. Because I think one of this isn't a gripe, this isn't a crabby thing about my job, but one of the frustrations in my job, right, is the fact that we invest significant amounts of human capital and financial capital on conducting these trials. They take a long time. They take a lot of effort, and many times, the papers they really may not get read. They may not get read, or really, open access has helped with that. But, I think probably the thing that twerks at me the most is the fact that, like, I really wish I could do more with social media, but I just don't have the bandwidth. I mean, I'm done. I can't, I'm so systematic. I've evaluated this, and it's like, I can't give up more sleep. Because I'm at that cusp where if I go below it, things are just, I feel good. I got a good energy. I still like to work. Like I got a lot of positives, but, and then I can't, I can't allow my time to get threatened with my family any more than what it already does. So there's just not enough time in the day. I think if there's one thing that if in the next 5 years, I could really do a better job at, is to figure out a way how to push what we do out through more graphic design, infographic development, small little videos or different things. That honestly would be really, 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 really pretty cool. So if there's somebody listening that has any interest in kind of doing that, I would certainly be interested. But Ben, I do feel unbelievably fortunate to be a part of so many different types of things. It's really, really pretty amazing. When I look back on, my thesis project was a 10-week resistance training study on some basically, kind of examining a combination of protein. Our results did not align. We were kind of trying to showcase a certain package of nutrients that was a commercial product. Our results didn't turn out that way. Our protein control performed as good or better in our primary outcomes of strength and body count. And but it was ironic, because we started to look into that, and that study gave us some of the first training study data to illustrate that, hey, if we combine these fast and slow milk proteins, whey and casein, maybe that's better. Maybe that's pretty cool. But at the time, we're like, holy shit, what happened? Like, how did this happen? So that kind of stuff is really neat, where you just fall on it. But we've done a lot of different training studies, done some mechanistic things. I think definitely getting to the conferences, going through all the travel that I've gone through over the last few years, it creates opportunities to meet people and get involved. And what do I have to be crabby about, Ben? I have too much going on. You know what I mean? So I think that the biggest thing that has changed within my day is, the afternoons, 1-2 hours where I can just grab a couple of papers and just lose myself in the information and think about what it means and those days are really, really numbered. They're really unique. And I miss that. I do miss that. But I'm also pragmatic, and I realize that I can fix that problem. I can stop taking on projects. I can stop doing things. I can stop being so busy, and I'll have more of that time. So that's kind of an inner conflict. So on the bad days when I don't have enough coffee, I'm a little crabby.
Yeah, I appreciate your honesty with that. I forget if it was Tim Ferriss or someone who was talking about like being invited to all these conferences and speaking, and at some point it became too much, and they had a new decision making tool called Hell Yes or No, and if you're not a full on hell yeah, then it's got to be a no. And it's like for people like us who are very excited, and my wife gets on me about this too, like because I have trouble saying no to cool new projects and everything. We at some point need to figure out like some way of saying no, so you'll get there. But at the same time, what I like to tell people like yourself who are well-spoken and understand the science is that we could definitely use your help in getting that out there. So we appreciate you taking the time on this podcast. What I thought was really cool at ISSN, and we can get into that in a little bit, but like the 1 minute power rounds where they're under the gun to like explain their poster presentation within 1 minute, and then the bullhorn goes off if they go too long. That was basically an Instagram reel in the making. And it's almost like you have to like build yourself up into like spitting this stuff out in just 1 minute. But we would love to like occasionally borrow you and have you throw out like a quick 1 minute video if you could distill all that information into the most important key points and everything. But that's kind of my comment there. Can you really quickly explain like what your day is like that's making it so busy? Is it a lot of the teaching? Like what are you doing all day?
It's funny, Mike, is when I was an early professor, I developed a habit of asking people that exact same question, but that's the first time I think somebody's ever asked me it. So I remember asking Frank Booth that question. Frank Booth's an iconic molecular biologist, physical activity scientist at the University of Missouri. I remember asking Oscar, you can group that question. It's funny, both of them were like, you really don't want to know the answer to that question. But, my typical day, I will, the alarm usually goes off sometime between 4:30 and 5, kind of depends upon where I'm at. I can't explain it, but I'm usually typically really pretty itching to do some type of like writing at that period of time. I'll have my coffee, and I'll usually go down for about an hour. I really like to do like an hour and a half. I really think about this a lot because I try to get so much crammed into the first few hours of my day. And then I'll go and get some exercise. So I typically will, I like doing resistance training. I've really done a lot of more like metabolic conditioning kind of related things. I'm actually I signed up, got a group there's a sport nutrition company here in St. Louis called First Form that I've been affiliated with for quite some time, and not affiliated. I've known those people. I've supported them. I've helped them. And, so I go and work out at their headquarters. If you haven't looked at it, it's a pretty amazing facility. So I feel really blessed to be able to walk in that building, and so there's a big group of us that are going to do a High Rocks event. If you've heard of High Rocks, in Dallas in November. So I'm going to get absolutely crushed because I'm old and I'm not as fit as some of these other pups, but it really has been a lot of fun over the last month or so. So I'll get in and work out for about an hour or so, come home, and then I usually like to, about that time, it's around 7:30 during the school year. My girls are up; they should be up, and so kind of help them with breakfast, small conversations, get the kitchen cleaned up, get them off to school. If I had enough time, get a shower, and then head off to work. I'm usually on campus by 9:30, and then I honestly try to spend the first couple hours of my day, even at the university. I try to block my client. I think I have my calendar blocked almost every day from like 9 to noon, because I still have things that I have to get done for the university for my research program. So I don't want all of the distractions. And then around 11:30 noon, I would kind of open up my calendar, open up my door, and then all the noise starts to hit, and I'll hang in there depending on whatever the afternoon holds until kind of 4 o'clock. And I've really gotten a lot better at when I get home, I'm pretty much done. And a lot of times I'm so tired by 9:30, like mentally, I don't, even if I really wanted to read a paper, I really would, I'd be operating on about 3% productivity. So what's the point at that, and that's honestly my day, I love to work on my house. My wife and I, kind of renovated a lot of different aspects of our house. And that part so we spend a lot of our weekends doing those kind of things. My daughters swim, and do basketball and do some soccer. So we're chasing them around with that. And that's probably been the biggest change, I think, over the last 5 years, is just that the girls have gotten older, and now they're doing things, and you have to travel and commute. And so, grabbing a couple hours in an afternoon to do some writing, there's just those pockets of time just aren't there like they used to be.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes a big difference. So,
gotcha.
Yeah.
I do appreciate that you prioritize writing, because we I'm sure in your role sometimes you get into like operations type things or management of things, and when we see talent not producing, we things have to be done, but things need to be produced. And so if you're writing and helping to continue to produce stuff that we could eventually at least like leverage for our content, then we're very happy. But yeah, I totally understand as the kids grow up and everything. I hear like Ben and Derek, I'm like, what are you guys doing all day without kids? Like, it blows my mind. Like, there's no time for video games once you're like firing and stuff. So it's I hear you, but yeah, maybe not to the extent of how busy you are. So yeah, again, your work is greatly appreciated. I guess the next question is, how did you get involved into your position in ISSN? I assume you've been with ISSN for quite a while and kind of worked your way up, or how did it work?
I think that's safe. If it really goes back to my academic path, Rick Ryder, who I, first connected with at University of Memphis, was one of the 5 original founders of ISSN. So I mean, there all through our education, and it really kind of started at Baylor. All through our, in the summers, I remember being at the very first conference. I haven't been to every conference. There was some time when I was but I've been to most of them. And, so I think that's ultimately how you get involved. You first, you're there and you just start to meet people. You're kind of a quiet, shy student who's just wanting to learn and get as many free samples from the booth sponsors as possible, and read abstracts, and then it just transitions into, you have some relationships, you get to meet other people, and then you get opportunities to whether it's, write a paper or do different things along those lines. I would say my involvement on the research and publication side really accelerated when I was at the University of Oklahoma. As I mentioned, I was fortunate to have somebody like Jeff Stout, basically, 2 doors down. He had been in the business for 10, 12 years, and, I'd worked in industry, worked at academics, and my academic tenure at that point was measured in weeks, and it was great to have him available. It's a funny story just in terms of, right place, right time, or whatever else. I mean, I remember just kind of, walking down the hallway one day and hearing Jeff say, "Hey, Chad, come here." And, he's like, "Would you have any interest in, revising one of the new position standards for ISSN on nutrient timing?" And I'm like, done. Like, hell yes, and again, like at that time, man, I wasn't even married. I didn't have any kids, it was just full immersion. And for science geeks like myself, it was pretty cool, but I mean, for those that are listening, that's just one of those stories of, I was there, I had established myself a little bit with some writing. Jeff was probably talking to Joey and, "Hey, who can we do this?" And Jeff, and they knew that I came from Rick's lab, and I was a young person wanting to get my career going, and it was a document that was going to be pretty important. And so that's literally how I got involved with the very first one, edited the second one, and then all the position stands kind of started, building from there. And yeah, so that's my involvement with the ISSN.
It almost seems, well, it's really relevant. A lot of people ask us, a lot of consumers ask us, how do we get involved? How do we get to do cool stuff in the industry? a lot of it is being at the right place at the right time, like you being in that hallway when Jeff called your name, but also because you're putting in time before that, right? Just putting in work where you can.
Yeah, I'll tell you, so the thing that I would tell any student or any person involved in the industry is, I mean, get to a conference like ISSN, get to Supply Side West, I mean, because there are, and also if you're dependent on what you're really looking for, like be prepared in the sense that, have a business card or have some things ready to discuss in terms of what you like, what you can do, what value can you bring. Because I think, particularly in the academic space, I think there's many academics that they can just think that if you've got PhD behind your name, that the seas part and the world just opens for you, and that's just not the case. Like you still have to prove yourself to people. You still have to, yes, you've gone through a very detailed pattern of education and training, but a lot of times for if you're talking to a CEO or a senior vice president of science, like they want to know how you're going to add value to them. They don't care if you published 50 papers or 100. They don't care. How can you add value right now? How can you help us do what we need to do? So those are things that people need to have the right framing on. But I think when I look back at just being at conferences as a young person, that has been unbelievably valuable. Like, I mean, I remember before I really got involved with research, I was at a national strength conditioning conference as an undergrad on my own dime because I loved it and I was interested in it. And I was very interested in strength conditioning at the time, kind of before my nutrition interest really kicked off. And I ended up meeting one of the strength conditioning coaches for you know USA Olympics. So basically they were the like in charge of one of the Olympic training centers out in Chula Vista. I'm like, oh, we'd love to have you as an intern. I'm like, what? Like, so those are just things that was just a matter of just being there. And as time evolves, now you get into a scenario where if there was a student at ISSN now that was looking for a place to go get their master's degree and they had a chance to talk to me, I mean, I've got spots open in my lab right now. Like, and Rick Ryder has spots for PhD that people could go to right now. And then also companies, if you're looking for people to help you analyze content, write content, help you figure out strategic plans on certain products or designs moving forward, help you conduct a clinical trial on something moving forward. I mean, there's just a number of being at the conferences can really, really help. I think in a lot of different ways.
So when you say you have spots open in your lab right now, what does that entail?
Yeah, so a key part of the lab, and through my experience as a student, but also now as a faculty member, and all of these university laboratories that are producing publications and papers and different things, they'll have academic degree programs where students are getting their master's degree or PhD, and many of these laboratories will have like research assistant type positions where these students will work kind of period of time every week. In exchange, they'll either, they'll obviously get paid for that job, and that those funds can be used to help basically, like offset their tuition. Many universities will have tuition waivers in addition to small stipends. So when I say I've got opportunities right now for, we've got a couple of spots, open and I remember Rick Ryder complimenting, one of the students on one of her presentations at ISSN and say, if you're looking for a place to get your PhD, give me a call. I mean,
That's
just
awesome.
stuff like that, so.
I'm just kind of curious, what does that mean? Does that mean that if you're a student there, you should call him? If you're not a student, but you want to be a student there, you should call him? What if you're not a student and you're not interested in your PhD, but you want to have experience in a lab? Like, what does that mean for a variety of different kinds of people?
I mean, I think, for the majority of people, it would mean that they're typically enrolled in a degree program at the university. I think that there's, but that doesn't mean that that's the only way. You don't have to be a student. I think one of the things that people have to realize, because we kind of deal with this, we have other universities in St. Louis, and we're doing, we try to really promote that we open our doors to students to learn and kind of understand a little bit more about how science can be used. And so we'll get students from other universities that'll want to do an internship in the summer. So they're not our student, but the thing, that there has to be some type of legal connection to the university. Like you can't just walk in the lab and start collecting data. There's IRB regulations associated with that. And then, then you have to look at it. So what we have to have, so you have to be enrolled in some kind of a class, offered by a real class offered by the institution. And that's honestly, at least in our situation, that's more for like liability related reasons. That way, Ben, if you're in the lab and you're helping with the VO2 test and somebody goes and codes and dies of a heart attack and you're, that, and there's a lawsuit and everything else involved that everybody that potentially may come in the line of fire, are officially affiliated with the university in some respects along those lines. So, but there's certainly mechanisms, where people can kind of get some experience, as well. But I think a lot of the times those things have to be really good fits to work, So like right now there's a young lady from Italy who's kind of emailing with me about, wanting to spend a year of her PhD over in our lab. And that's kind of one of the first times that's ever happened here and probably at my institution. So, you have to talk to, so there's, visa questions and all those other things. You have to kind of get that kind of stuff ironed out.
It's
With
awesome
respect to your lab, what would you say? Let's say we run a supplement company and we're going to have a full line of products or whatever. Like, what is your lab really great at doing?
I think within the general realm of exercise physiology, exercise, we take a very broad term. And when I say exercise physiology, we can think of like musculoskeletal outcomes. So strength, power, endurance, aerobic, kind of aerobic endurance or capacity, whether it's time to exhaustion, time trials with, treadmill cycles. We have, metabolic carts to measure metabolic responses, resting metabolic rates. We can do all of those things. Body composition. We've got all of the, some of the popular ways of measuring body composition. We can sample blood. We can sample urine. We've done fecal collection studies. We're going to do a study, ideally at some point in the fall where we're collecting blood, urine, saliva, and feces. We're going full speed on everything there. So, Darren Willoughby, when I was at Baylor, as part of my dissertation, a number of studies when I was at Oklahoma, he trained me to collect skeletal muscle tissue. So we could technically do biopsies. That gets really involved. So it just demands more capacity and more infrastructure, and we've really kind of shied away from doing that because of the infrastructure. But yeah, Mike, I mean, I would say if I were giving you a pitch, I would say, honestly, anything related to, common contemporary outcomes associated with health, performance, and recovery, my lab can measure. And as a very, very broad, and you're like,
Gotcha.
well, what about this? We can probably do it, so.
I don't know if you guys have any directions that you'd want to go from this conversation, but you mentioned your ability to test fecal during that, and we had a rather spirited discussion about your recent data on fecal data. I'd love to get into it here if you guys are interested. If you'd like to share your recent study on Tia-Clair's fecal.
I mean, Ben, everybody 100%. Loves talking about poop. Who doesn't love talking about poop?
Yeah, I hope people who are listening or watching understand. Like, I'm not hoping to just talk about poop here. I mean, but you presented a study before I knew you personally last year. I got to watch you present at the Sports and Active Nutrition Summit about studying the fittest woman in the world's fecal matter over the course of her prep for CrossFit Games. Like, could you tell us like when was that? When did you get to get all these samples? And tell us as much as you can about what it told you.
Yeah. And I kind of reference that in my talk at ISSN, because I would say the lab that I run and how I've been trained. I mean, honestly, every study but that one we've done, like full blown clinical trial type setups with randomization and different groups and placement and outcomes. And so, we did a case study where we tracked an individual over a certain period of time and tried to measure things as systematically as we could. And as Ben mentioned, the person that we followed, a lady by the name of Tia-Clair Toomey, who has won the the women's side of the CrossFit Games, so the fittest female on the planet, 6 different times. I think she's the only athlete in the sport that's won it 6 times. So, and I think it was 6 in a row as well. And she was not able to defend her title because she ended up delivering her first child. So so I think she's expected to kind of get back in the mix, get back in the throw this year. But we'll have to see. But so that was during 2022, and honestly, I love the story. So like because it's so cool. And I think I was kind of getting into this when we were shouting at each other at the bar on Thursday night there at ISSN, or Wednesday night or whatever night that was. But we were a group of my students, people working in the lab. We went over to that company called First Form, and we were going to take some pictures. We were working on getting some content built for one of our training studies. So we were there to just kind of take pictures of us doing some workouts or whatever else. And I was not a CrossFit person. I was aware of the sport, never really did it. And there was a picture of Tia in one of the rooms running on one of the treadmills, and one of my workers was a pretty avid CrossFitter and said, "Holy cow! Like, did they like?" She's like, "That's Tia-Clair Toomey," and I'm like, "Who's that?" And so you could just tell, like, she was female. She was just all, well, wasn't but 4 or 5 minutes later, Jarrett Bond came walking through, and Jarrett's a really good friend at
Jarrett. That is so cool.
Yeah.
I met Jarrett at my first demo I ever did this industry. Great team.
Jarrett is an unbelievably amazing human.
Yes.
When you think of, we all know people that are just unbelievably great humans. He is in that category. He is an amazing person. But he works for First Form, and he kind of coordinates all of the athlete connections and relationships and everything else. And I knew that. And he came popping through, and, "Hey, Chad, what's up?" And I'm like, "Hey, like, is this, does Tia work with you?" And, "Oh yeah, she's great." He gets all excited and starts talking real fast. And I was just like, man, if there's ever any opportunity to kind of follow somebody like that, like take our lab's resources and track somebody like that, help give them a little bit of insight, we'd be really interested in doing it. And I mean, sure as shit, about 2 weeks later, he gives me a phone call and he's like, "Hey, I talked to Tia." I'm like, "She's down." And I'm like, "Uh-oh. Okay." So, so from there, we were probably on the phone with her 2 weeks later. So this is first introduction. She had, just me and Jared. So we kind of talked through that. And we laid out a plan starting in April of 2022, which is kind of the beginning of her major throw into training leading up to the games in August. We would do some assessments kind of at midpoint, as much as her and her coach would allow. And then we try to get as much surrounding the games as possible. So we drove to the games in Madison, and we're there. But we went down, cool story, great. We took a Toyota Highlander, loaded this thing up with a Load Excalibur Sport, which is like a $24,000 computerized cycle ergometer. We had a $28,000 metabolic cart. We had force plates, blood collection, urine collection. We had all these things, and we drove down to Nashville and literally set up a lab right inside the CrossFit box. So we, one of the coolest experiences of my life, we did a max VO2 on her in the middle of a Lifetime Fitness in Franklin, Tennessee, right during hours. We pulled a couple treadmills aside. Their GM was amazing. He opened the doors for us. And we literally did a VO2 because CrossFitters don't use computer or like motorized treadmills. They use and we had to standardize the workload. So that's why we did that. But then so that's what started everything. We drew some blood, did basal metabolic rates, and then we just kind of left her alone, and she kind of went through training. We did get a stool sample, a feces sample at that point, and we got stool samples about 2 weeks before the games started. We were able to go down. They didn't want us to get too close to the games. We got another stool sample right after the games, literally her first bowel movement after the games we got, And then she also gave us another sample about 7 days later. We modeled that after a case study that was done on an ultra endurance athlete. So our fecal collection time points aligned with them. And then we measured strength outcomes and power. We've got, we did a number of things. And then I'm just trying to think of, so it was really neat. I mean, we were able to communicate with her. We got some blood samples on her before the game started. Our plan was to try to take a very small blood sample after like the second and the third day. And that didn't work out. She had a little bit of a hiccup on one of the first nights, and they didn't want any distractions. So we just kind of hung out all week, and it was, looking back on it, it was a lot of travel for a very little amount of data. But it was a really, really fun experience. Honestly, it was so much better because how great Tia was with it. People don't realize that, like, as cool as it was what we did, like, this was the last thing on her freaking mind. Like, this is her Super Bowl, this is how her bread gets buttered. This is her paycheck. This is why she has sponsors. And, here's these little science geeks wanting to come into her lab and put this little measurement on and do this and do that. Hey, can you do this and do that? Right. So it's like, you kind of have to learn your place, but she was amazing looking back on it, because everything we asked her to do, she followed up on. We didn't get a lot of nutrition data or training data because, to be frank, they really didn't want that to become public knowledge. Mm-hmm. They felt like if there was really anything that would, and they, and I mean, they post their training, and she does things on nutrition, but and I'm like, that's fine. We did get enough of a broad indicator to get an idea of what she was consuming, and so forth. So we took those blood samples, took those stool samples, and partnered with Jonathan Scheinman with Metabolomics. They were gracious enough to kind of cover the costs of. They kind of added those samples on to one of their data sets that they were getting to analyze, and we did kind of full blown metagenomics and metabolomics on the stool samples. So what that means is that all of the metabolites in the stool, you just get a comprehensive look, in how they're changing within those samples. And then the metagenomics starts to get at an idea of like what type of bacteria are present, how many of them, how dense they are, and to what extent they may be changing across time. And that right there, from a science element, has still to this day has never been done. And Ben, you're doing it to me again. I start talking about it. I'm like, damn it, I got to get this stuff written, because if I don't, it's like you did all this fun work, but and then it's not that you want to get scooped or somebody else gets, but it's like, but there's still these cool elements of, she's an unbelievably elite female athlete. She's an anaerobic strength and power athlete. We measured things longitudinally, which a lot of times for these case studies, it's a one-off. You get them after they're done or before they're done. We got all that. And then we have all these detailed changes across the board. We also have metabolomics in blood, which is really pretty fascinating to see. We don't do a lot of that work. It's really expensive to do, and our projects just haven't aligned with that. We could, but man, to get all the data back, you just get tables of these metabolites. You're like, what? There's like 80% of these, I don't even know how to pronounce them.
Yeah,
I have to literally look them up. So
there's so many questions I have for you. One of the big things I wanted to note is that you also got samples from her sister as well, which is really cool.
Yeah, and I think that was, so we did try to make it as much of a science experiment as possible. So what because I think that's one of the criticisms of case study, right? There's no controls, whatever else. So we thought, well, if we're going to try to bring in some of this fecal data, would it be possible to get a poop sample from one of her siblings, one of her sisters? And sure enough, she facilitated the conversation. I was there inside the room. And her sister kind of looked at her like she grew a set of horns. And then she's like, come on, it's no big deal. Like, basically, I'll help you do it. And I mean, it's like you get a phone call, a couple hours later, she's like, we got it all taken care of. I'm like, okay, that's amazing. That's just amazing.
It's
amazing.
you mentioned
That is the best, the best subject ever. Participant, whatever you call it. Yeah.
So, and then we also, to add to that, we wanted to, so her native country is Australia. So her sister lives in Australia. So we also actually got what we're going to refer to as like an epigenetic control. So we have Tia, I believe, was 28 at the time. I have to look back at my records. I think she was 28 at the time. So we also have a 28-year-old female from her CrossFit box who also gave us a stool sample. So we have an age, gender, community, environment match in terms of the air that she breathes and the water that she drinks and everything else. Now, we weren't able to get those across the time course, but still it does allow for at least some level of comparison with some of the graphs and things along those lines. So I think those are some of the reasons why we feel really, really good about being able to get the data published. But I need to stop talking about it and get it published. But again, like, it goes back to what Mike was saying. You got so many damn balls in the air, and there's other things that just get pushed in front of it.
Do you have any sort of you talked about the longitudinal nature of those samples? Like, were you able to look at changes in those at all from, kind of the prep camp to what happened after the insane training that was the games?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we were. And I think, one of the biggest challenges with with doing something like that, right, is the most natural question for somebody to ask is, well, what'd you find? How did I do? What does it mean? And you're like, well, because you only have one person, so I can't compare it to a group of other people and say, wow, this highly trained, so maybe we'll certainly try to do that in some of the data, understanding that it's not analyzed under the same equipment or whatever else, but that's just what you have to do with case studies. But I think, Ben, probably one of the most fascinating things to see, because like when I shared this data with Dr. Ralph Yeager, he was really excited, just kind of blown away with it, in the sense that, when you look at, much of the microbiome related work that we're seeing in populations or in groups of people tracking changes over time, are just the changes in the communities. Mm-hmm. Is this strain going, this species going up or down? So we're able to see that from April until 2 weeks before the games. And her changes were really consistent with what we're seeing with other kind of physically active individuals. But the part that we really saw that was really pretty unique and different, just to give us an idea from a science side of things, is, at the fecal level, like, there is massive amounts of shifts in the metabolites that are produced from the beginning of the games to the end of the games. So that's a 7-day period or so, and then they revert. Then from the end of the games, and then she goes on 7 days, and and she's resting and relaxing and probably not training as much and eating more fatty foods and probably drinking more booze and everything else along those lines too, right? So just the fact that they are changing relatively quickly, mm-hmm. Was really pretty interesting to really kind of identify, because of course we know within the blood, within the plasma, like, those things change. They can change within hours. But even just to be able to document that there were really pretty significant shifts in the different metabolites, reflective of the different type of physical work that she had been doing, was really pretty interesting.
Can you specify which metabolites?
Honestly, Mike, I really don't know off the top of my head. That's
fine.
I'm not trying to be evasive on it. I literally, there's so many of them, cool. So I think you really almost have to break it down in the sense that, metabolites that are reflective of, like, carbohydrate metabolism, mm-hmm. Unbelievably mm-hmm. massive shifts. So you look at, like fold levels of change, boom, off the chart. Anaerobic metabolism, pH balance, off the charts. Totally not surprising. Mm-hmm. So kind of anything related to the macronutrients and those elements, you're seeing fairly consistent patterns of change at the feces level that we see at the blood level. It's just that the magnitude is much it's lower because of just the blood changes so rapidly. So that's a little bit of insight in terms of some of the different changes that we're seeing.
I would be expecting to see, like, I don't know what the biomarker is in feces, but anything with stress, like I would love to see like what the changes are from like because obviously the level of stress she's putting on her body for preparing for the games is in some ways comparable to what she'll do in the games. So I'd love to see like the difference in how do the games treat her versus when she was training as intensely as possible.
Yeah, yeah, and and I have to look back, because we did measure, like a handful of different hormones in the blood, and honestly, like that's really where we were really hoping to be able to get a couple of samples, like
Hmm.
right when she got done during the game, so you could see this, just to what extent testosterone and cortisol and CRP and all these other things were changing. But it just that wasn't in the cards. We weren't able to do it. So when you're doing some of those things at the beginning and end of the games, there's a little bit of a time aspect related there. So,
Well, if we can't go much further on that, what I'd love to ask is at the beginning of this conversation, you talked about, one of your biggest, nagging things is that you create a lot of information and not all of it gets read or, disseminated out into the public. So almost kind of putting you on a 1 minute timer thing here. I'd love to go through a couple,
now, us science guys like to be
yeah,
prepared, Mike. We're not, or Ben, I'm sorry. We're not, this makes us really
I
nervous, but go
understand,
ahead.
but I'd love to hear like your top three favorite things that you've produced. I feel like the things that you are most proud of or excited about, we could talk about at a high level. I'd love to hear, because if you feel like things are not getting out there, I think that we have a great platform to share those kinds of pieces of information. So I'd personally love to hear like your favorite pieces of content or data that you've produced that you feel like you wish had gotten out there more.
Well,
I can suggest one that I wanted to get back to,
if
maybe
you
to
could
give
see
you a
my
little help.
little
Yeah.
brain wheels
You
going right
mentioned
now.
this is something we've been citing a little bit more frequently lately, fast and slow proteins together.
Yeah.
We've gone into this direction of all whey proteins, but there's some data, some of it's animal data, maybe a little bit of human data showing that you mix them together and better things happen, especially in the rodent data that I've seen. So maybe that's one of them. Just trying to give
Well,
you.
so Mike, I mean, I was really gonna. So Ben, the first thing I was gonna say was probably our collective work within protein,
Okay.
because some of the initial work was really kind of what I talked about with the impact of the fast and slows and how mixing them might be beneficial. We did one of we did the really, I mean, like the second study with like a rice protein isolate. And that was really kind of when plant proteins were growing in popularity, and we were, I think, kind of, one of those to help illustrate that, hey, look, if we're able to give a plant protein source, that has enough leucine and have enough of the essentials, that where it's coming from may take a back seat to those types of elements. When you layer in the things that we've done with timing and how protein gets into those discussions, have been a part of kind of evaluating like a lot of different literature. So I think my command of dietary protein is one of those areas where I think that I really enjoy the topic, because I think when I interact with the folks like at First Form, and they're working with individuals who want to lose weight, and want to, so you've got all those gen pop related considerations. So the work that we've done in that area, but then moving it all the way over to strength and performance. So I definitely like that. We recently published some work with a multi-strain probiotic in just kind of average, middle-aged men and women, healthy men and women, where and we showed that it, basically that probiotic supplementation can perturb, can impact, the gut-brain axis. So we saw, kind of significant changes within a number of perceived indicators of like mood and depression and anxiety. And then we also saw kind of a modulation of serotonin. So I think that was really pretty interesting, kind of across the board, and then, like I said, that we've, there's just been other, like, I mean, we did, kind of a, like a number of different things, even with, from my days at University of Oklahoma, where we were collecting a lot of skeletal muscle tissue, and really, kind of identifying the impact of resistance exercise on transcriptional capacity and translational capacity, which is basically fancy terms for, how our muscle, kind of maintains the ability or extends its ability to grow and repair and recover. So I think we kind of work within those elements as well. So,
do you find yourself changing your lifestyle when you're doing this kind of science? Like, do you change your training or your nutrition often with these things?
so it'd be amazing if there was a video of my wife right now to just watch her facial expression, because then we get so many questions. So like, you're out in social settings or whatever else, you meet somebody, hey Chad, what do you do? I work for Lindenwood. Oh, what area? Health and performance. And, and I go, what kind of stuff do you do? I teach and do research in sport nutrition and run this lab. And they're like, whoa, like you must really be crazy about your workouts and your diet. And, and I mean, my wife and I are really pretty free with it, like we do really, really good day to day. We don't really go way off the rails with our food and our drinking, and we're really pretty consistent about our workouts. So I would say, but yeah, I do think that, I think, Ben, instead of like making changes, I think one of the things that the science has really showed me over time is the power of consistency. Just getting in and as you go from 20s to 30s to 40s to 50s, just ring the bell, get in there and do something. Lift some weights, go for a walk, go for a jog, get something that, and commit to doing that. And then that I think is probably one of the things that I talk to myself the most with. I really have tried to embrace doing more conditioning, because, I definitely went through periods in my 20s where, I was very interested in, kind of a more from like a physique or bodybuilding side of things. I never really pursued a lot of size because I'm naturally, I've got a pretty good size frame naturally. So, so that, but I think as I've gotten older, I've definitely tried to stay lean, try to work on conditioning, and different things along those lines. I'm definitely protein centric in my diet. It doesn't mean I only eat protein. I mean, but I definitely do try to limit. If I'm going to err, I'll err with getting more protein, which is something I would teach to a lot of people too.
I kind of asked
That's
that.
what I figured he was going to answer. Like you start reading some of these studies, like, man, I got to double down on protein, or like if anything else, just watch out for the fat carbs. Like we're carbs and cupcakes, carbs and fats together, not enough protein. You're gonna be hungry. So like the research repeatedly shows this. And you read a good study like yours that you've published, like, yeah, I gotta double down on protein.
Yeah, and I think the thing that I really do when I'm talking to people in the public or even trying to lecture to general population, it many times I really feel like though people need to do, like they need to make drastic shifts, just swing the pendulum from one side, you're over here, you got to go way over here now. And I'm like, no, I don't think we necessarily need to do that. We're talking about some subtle changes, like what can we do day after day? What are, let's get that consistency bit going. Cause I just think a lot of times that's how people respond to it. And I don't know, like we all have our own emotions and motivations and behavior mitigators and inhibitors and all that kind of stuff. So we just have to work with what we got.
I kind of asked that question kind of knowing that I feel like at a certain point of research and reading, you eventually come to realize that consistency and riding the midline is probably the most important thing, rather than a lot, I kind of make fun of the researchers that are big influencers right now. They want us to be taking very specific supplements and doing all sorts of protocols and really kind of uprooting our lives for all sorts of things. But when I talk to most, active researchers, it's really most about consistency. And I find that I see most of you guys at the bar anyway, too. Like we mostly enjoy our social settings as well. Like we don't really starve ourselves of the things that we enjoy in life, but we try to be consistently in the gym and taking care of our health.
Yeah. It's funny, Ben, because I've had thoughts. I'm like, man, if I was going to do like some type of like a pattern of things on social media, if I could ever get myself working on that, I would love to be able to document my path of having a bowl of ice cream and a glass of whiskey every night and look at body composition changes. Now not 5 glasses of whiskey and not 2, not a multiple, but because like I do, I enjoy very much an old fashioned or a Manhattan or a cocktail, and I love eating dessert, and but I also too, I'm going to get my ass up and I'm going to get to the gym in the morning too, and I'm probably not going to have both of those after, mowing down a whole bunch of food as well. So I think that consistency and moderation across all elements is really pretty powerful. I really even tried to speak to that, like within my talk at ISSN, in the sense that, like people have to embrace the fact that if we're talking about making changes in our health and performance and physique, an overwhelming percentage of the changes that we're going to see are going to be driven by the diet and exercise response that you do day in and day out. Overwhelming. It's undisputed. Yet I get it. If I'm a supplement manufacturer, that's not really something that you want to highlight to people, right? Like you want it to be that 80% is the supplement, and that's just simply not what the case is. So but I think the reality is that many people they lose sight of that. They forget that that's the thing. But I think also too, for people that are largely uneducated, who don't have the thinking and training background and don't live in the space like somebody like myself or others do, it's easy if you're going to try to consume your content on TikTok or Instagram or Facebook, and you have these people that have degrees and are taking, and they're yelling and shouting things, kind of shoving down things down your throat about, you have to consume this or consume that. I mean, they're there to try to learn, and so you can't really fault them for it. But it is a little bit unfortunate because it's somewhat misguided. I've been involved in a number of conversations with different groups where like we're talking about the power of a certain supplement to cause this outcome, and I'm like, no, wait a minute, like why aren't we talking about getting 45 minutes, 30 to 40 minutes of physical activity every day first? Let's talk about that first, and let's and then let's talk about their diet, and now we can really layer that supplement in, because I just think that the reality of it is if we're not leveraging things in that order, the power of what that supplement may be able to do is going to get completely overwhelmed by the power of exercise and the power of the diet. I kind of use a metaphor of using hammers, and it's just exercise is a huge hammer, big old hammer that when you swing it, it's going to cause some damage. And, so if that ever gets changed, it's going to significantly influence a lot of those other things. So,
So we brought up ISSN 2024. I know you were busy, like kind of running a lot of it. Were there any presentations or posters that you found that were really good? And also there will be a proceedings eventually published too. Are you involved in that?
I signed the publishing agreement on the proceedings yesterday, Mike.
Oh, sweet. Can't wait to see
who's the good writers we
out.
I would imagine it will be in print. I don't know what the publication process is on the publisher side. 2 to 4 weeks.
Excellent.
As a ballpark guess, I'm not sure. But yes,
any that stood out to you?
Well, I didn't really have much time to look over the abstracts as a whole. We were pleased with the number of abstracts that were there, and I think overall, but as far as the presentations that were there, I mean, Darren Candow's talk on he was a keynote on creatine and how creatine's evolved. I really like that perspective where he just kind of brought it from the very initial things and how the heavy focus on performance, and then it kind of moved into hypertrophy, and then we started asking questions about other tissues, and that's really where something like creatine is. I think that was a really nice, well-informed discussion. I honestly, I did not get to sit in on a number of the talks because I was chasing down other presentations or doing other types of things. But of the ones that I did, like I heard a lot of positive comments, and I was able to sit on David Church's talk about, kind of the pyramid of anabolism. I think people really enjoyed his perspective on a number of different factors that are commonly not discussed. So I think that conversation went very, very well. I think if there's I'm going to plug, becoming a member of the ISSN, I think one of the biggest benefits of being a member of the ISSN is that members get access to the different slides that are presented by the speakers. So people could go in and get those slides available. I also really did enjoy Brandon Roberts, who's with the U.S. Army, and where he was kind of addressing and talking about how the Army is looking at something like semaglutide, surrounding weight loss and the impact on the force and things to that effect. So it's just kind of a different take on it. So those were, I think, some of the biggest things. To be very candid, I didn't have the majority of my slides put together when I got to the conference, so I was spending my mornings working on my own slides too. So
got to crab sometimes.
I know.
Awesome. Well, the GLP thing is going to bring us into our next conversation, which is going to be a lot more specific. So I'd like to close this one out and say thank you very much. Do you still have time to keep ripping and discuss a couple of the specific things that we are also going to be covering that's separate? So yeah, thanks for giving us the general introduction. I think you're going to become a valuable asset to the community, and you will definitely be, we'd like to leverage you if we ever have any questions about certain studies or, what's this p-value mean or whatever it is, and if we can get you to rip out a 1 minute Instagram reel, then all the better. It gets your name out there a little bit. So
you might need to show me how to do that if I need to do it. I mean, well, not maybe have to. You're absolutely going to have to show me how to do that.
Well, just like your first study wasn't very good, I guess the first 20 that you make are just going to be not as good as you want, and then eventually you get good at it and everything. So
yeah.
Awesome. Well, Chad, thanks again. And everyone else can stay tuned to the next episode. We're going to get into a couple specific ingredients and topics.
All right. Thanks, Mike.